used to think that if I dressed appropriately, smiled at the right moments, and kept my hands folded just so, I'd always have a place at the table. The dress had been hanging in my closet for 3 weeks. Coral, not too loud, not too pale. A color I used to hold up in stores, then put back, as if brightness needed permission. I'd had it hemmed just above the ankle and lined properly because I knew what it meant to sit long hours without a wrinkle to hide behind. The saleswoman said it warmed my skin tone. I nodded and let her believe that mattered. Charlotte had sent an email, curt lowercase unsigned. Please wear something neutral. The palette is ivory sage and champagne. Nothing too saturated. I didn't respond. I folded the email in my mind and placed it where most of her words lived, a drawer I no longer opened. At the venue, the planner glanced at the list clipped to her clipboard and pointed without meeting my eyes. Table 17. She moved on before I could ask if that was near the dance floor or at least within earshot of the head table. It wasn't. Table 17 sat between the server station and the door leading to the kitchen behind a modest ice sculpture shaped like a crane, or maybe a swan. My place card bore the name Genevieve Hartley, one and no middle initial, no Ms. I ran a fingertip along the edge, then set it back upright. The napkin was folded into a precise triangle. I didn't touch it. Guests trickled in, slowly faces I recognized from childhood photos, but not from recent years. They walked past me toward linen-draped tables, adorned with miniature eucalyptus bouquets and gold-rimmed chargers. No one stopped. No one asked why I was already seated. The music quieted with the faint chime of a spoon against a flute. Caleb stood beneath the canopy of soft lighting, a microphone in hand. He wore the tuxedo I had paid for 6 months ago, the one he never thanked me for. Charlotte stood beside him, flawless, with one hand gently placed on his arm like a seal of ownership. I just want to take a moment, Caleb said, his voice steady, rehearsed to thank someone very special. Someone who's been like a rock through all of this. My real mother. He turned past me, not toward me, and looked across the room. Evelyn, he continued. Thank you for welcoming me into your family, for your guidance, for being a steady, loving presence in my life. I'm so lucky to have you. There was applause. Quick, warm, generous. Chairs turned toward Evelyn Whitmore, who dabbed under her eye with a white linen square and placed her hand on her heart, as if the moment had arrived too suddenly to bear. Charlotte kissed Caleb's cheek. Someone at the next table whispered, beautiful. Another murmured, deserved. I kept my hands in my lap, fingers twined in practiced stillness. I adjusted the hem of my dress slightly to cover a spot on my shoe where the leather had cracked. The smile I wore was small and unmoving, not frozen, just still like the surface of tea gone cold. No one looked in my direction. I didn't need a spotlight. I had never wanted one. But erasure doesn't need to be loud to leave a mark. They took photos later. Caleb, Charlotte, Evelyn standing under a floral arch. Caleb's smile looked real. His hand rested easily on Evelyn's back. I stayed in my chair. No one invited me to join. I wouldn't have accepted, but it would have been a kindness to pretend. When the servers brought champagne for the toast, I declined. I sipped water, counting the bubbles clinging to the inside of the glass. The ice sculpture behind me had started to sweat. The napkin in my lap remained untouched. I couldn't remember unfolding it. A child at a nearby table spilled juice. His mother leaned in and whispered something sharp. The boy's eyes welled, but he didn't cry. I watched as he wiped the mess himself, blotting at the stain with the edge of his sleeve. He looked up once, seeking something, maybe softness. It never came. Later, when Charlotte passed by on her way to greet another cluster of guests, her eyes flicked to my dress. bold choice," she said, not stopping. Her heels clicked softly against the floor. I didn't reply. The rest of the evening blurred. Laughter drifted over centerpiece candles. The jazz quartet played familiar standards, and the photographer circled like a hawk capturing curated joy. No one asked me to dance. No one asked how I'd gotten there. No one noticed when I left. Back home, I didn't change out of the dress. I sat on the edge of the bed, the coral fabric pooling around my knees like something unfinished. The hallway light spilled across the carpet, familiar in a way that didn't comfort. The drawer in my desk opened with a slight resistance, like it remembered not being needed. Inside were folders I hadn't touched in years. Bank statements, insurance policies, a draft of a will with corrections penciled in. At the bottom, under a faded manila envelope, sat a small silver key taped to a folded note. My handwriting still careful, in case of everything. I didn't use it that night. I just let the key sit in my palm, its weight cooler than I remembered. I turned it once, then placed it back and closed the drawer. The silence wasn't new, but it felt differently shaped now. Not an absence, not a wound, just a room that no longer needed explaining. I don't think I disappeared in a day. That kind of vanishing takes time. One missed thank you, one closed door, one place card misspelled. Eventually, people stop checking for your name at all. Eventually, you stop raising your hand to wave, and that's how it happens. Not with a goodbye. Just with a pause no one bothers to fill. I used to believe that consistency could earn permanence. If I kept showing up even after the door barely opened one day, they might hold it wide. There was a winter when Caleb needed a new coat. He was 9, growing faster than my budget could keep pace with. I stitched patches into the lining of his old one to hold until I found a used parka at the church sale navy 3 sizes too big, the zipper missing its tab. I replaced it with a paper clip, then later a small wooden bead from a broken necklace. He liked that. Said it felt custom. I didn't correct him. He called me Aunt Jen until he was 12. After that, it was mostly just Jen. I didn't push. I folded the names he didn't use into a drawer of could-have-beens and tried not to open it too often. He was safe, warm-fed. That was enough. Or it should have been. The first time he brought Charlotte over, I set the table with cloth napkins and pulled out the ceramic casserole dish I usually saved for holidays. Caleb had once said my chicken pot pie was better than anything from a restaurant. I still remembered that even if he didn't. Charlotte arrived in a cream-colored coat that looked more expensive than my couch. She took it off without asking where to hang it and draped it across the banister. Her shoes didn't touch the mat. She offered a soft smile, but her eyes never settled. I told them dinner was ready. Caleb sat already helping himself. Charlotte looked at her plate, then at me. "I'm gluten-free," she said, placing her fork down neatly. "I usually mention that ahead of time." She didn't pick at the salad. She didn't ask for an alternative. She turned to Caleb and launched into a story about a luxury condo project her firm had just pitched in Aspen. I refilled the water glasses and listened to a conversation that didn't require me. When they left, she touched my elbow with the tips of her fingers. "Thank you, Genevieve. I'm sure that was a lot of effort. Not delicious. Not lovely evening. Just effort. As if I were a caterer who'd underperformed." I washed the casserole dish alone that night. The pot pie, mostly untouched, went into the fridge, then into the trash 3 days later. Caleb began calling less after that. Not abruptly, just a slow taper. Weekly check-ins became bi-weekly, then monthly, then only when he needed something. A scanned copy of his birth certificate, a recipe for the lemon bars I used to pack in his school lunches, his social security number, which I kept written on the back of a stained index card in the drawer with my church envelopes. The calls were short-clipped. No, how are you? No, have you eaten? Just bullet points and logistics. I began keeping a notepad near the phone. It stayed mostly blank. The Christmas after their engagement, I wrapped a small box for Charlotte. Inside were silver earrings, polished, but simple, the kind I thought she might wear to meetings or dinners that required subtle grace. I tied the ribbon twice, made sure the corners were crisp. She opened it during the gift exchange, glanced down, smiled once, then tucked the box onto the sofa beside her. At the end of the evening, it was still there. I picked it up after they left. No note inside, no card removed. Just the same as I'd wrapped it, ribbons slightly loosened. I placed the box in my closet beside the scarf she'd forgotten during her first winter visit. Neither were claimed. When Caleb emailed to ask for the account number tied to his old college fund, I replied with the figures and a reminder that the account was still in my name. He didn't respond. The next message came from Charlotte. "We'll handle it from here." That was the same week the family newsletter listed Evelyn as Caleb's second mother, his guide, his compass, his calm. I wasn't mentioned. I didn't bring it up. There was no space for that sort of thing. No one likes the sound of a chair being pulled out halfway just to be left empty. Years ago, when Caleb was 6, he drew a picture in crayon. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, beneath a yellow sun, with 12 spindly rays. The taller one wore a dress. The smaller held her hand. At the bottom, in blocky letters, "Me and Mom." I kept it tucked in the back of a kitchen drawer beneath receipts and old coupons. I looked at it sometimes, not to remember, but to confirm it had existed. It had. He gave up the word a year later. Not with malice, just absence. It slipped away like a misplaced sock. And I told myself it was fine. I told myself that being needed was a kind of name too. When I got the save-the-date postcard for the wedding, my name was printed next to an address I no longer lived at. No salutation, no note, just fonts and florals. I RSVP'd by mail. I wrote "will attend" in my neatest cursive. I didn't include a +1. I didn't think anyone would notice. A week later, Charlotte emailed again. "The photographer is asking for family groups in advance. Can you clarify if you'll be sitting with extended guests or prefer placement with non-immediate?" I stared at the screen until the words lost shape. Not immediate. Not family. I closed the laptop. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the drawer where the crayon drawing lived. I unfolded it slowly. The paper had softened at the creases, the color faded, but the words were still there, still crooked, still spelled right. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Some truths settle in like cold quiet, absolute and uninterested in whether you were ready. I used to believe that if I kept the calendar full of birthdays, anniversaries, school breaks, and milestones, it would somehow mean I belonged in them. The message came as a forwarded thread. Caleb had added me to the bottom of an email chain titled "Family Gathering, Sunday." There was no greeting, no context. Just a row of replies above it confirming desserts, dietary restrictions, carpooling. My name didn't appear anywhere except in the forwarding address line. I checked it twice, then again. Not to find something, but to prove I hadn't missed it. When I didn't reply, no one followed up. That Sunday, I stayed home and rearranged the spice shelf alphabetically, then by height. I watched a documentary about rivers and muted the volume halfway through. No one noticed my silence. No one asked why. A few days later, Charlotte posted a group photo. Evelyn stood in the center, hands resting lightly on Caleb's shoulder. To one side, cousin's spouse's a baby I hadn't known had been born. On the other, Charlotte flawless in cream. My face didn't appear, though I recognized the edge of my coat sleeve at the photo's border. The caption read, "Whole family, whole hearts." I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I closed the app and folded laundry without matching the socks. At Caleb's college graduation, I gave him a pair of cufflinks, silver engraved with his initials in small squared lettering. They came in a velvet box with a navy lining. I had saved up for weeks skipping lunches, avoiding the florist near the hospital, because her window always reminded me of things I couldn't afford. He opened the box, looked down at the pieces, and nodded once. "Thanks." He placed the box beside a pile of cards and walked toward Charlotte, who handed him a small wrapped package. I never saw the cufflinks again. I told myself he was tired, that graduations were chaotic, that good manners sometimes drowned in the noise of applause and caps in the air. Later that evening, Evelyn gave a toast. She raised a crystal flute and spoke about resilience and how proud we are of this young man. She used "we often." It echoed. I waited for my name to rise between the syllables, even once. It didn't. Caleb didn't look in my direction. Charlotte did, briefly. She turned to Evelyn and whispered something. Evelyn smiled, the kind of smile that floats, but doesn't land. When I left, no one noticed. I kept the program folded in my purse, its corner creased by the edge of my keys. Months passed. I still sent birthday cards. I bought them in batches, quiet watercolor ones that didn't say too much. I signed each with my full name, careful cursive, as if handwriting could matter when voices didn't. Then came the promotion party. I heard about it from Marla Jensen, who ran into me at the grocery store. "You must be so proud of Caleb. The whole event was lovely." I didn't understand at first. Then she clarified. "The speech Evelyn gave, just beautiful." I almost cried. I blinked. She was holding a bunch of bananas and a can of soup. Her cart was fuller than mine. I nodded, as if I'd forgotten, not been excluded. They posted pictures, she added. "You should see the cake." It had the company logo. I smiled, told her to have a nice evening. I left the bananas. I didn't go back to that store for weeks. Later that night, I found the photos. Evelyn again center stage. Caleb beside her cutting the cake. Charlotte to his right hand near the knife. No sign of me. The caption read, "Grateful for every strong woman behind this moment." It didn't sting. It just settled like something I'd already learned but hadn't said aloud. There was a post not long after. A photo of Evelyn Charlotte and Charlotte's niece. All in navy. All laughing at something out of frame. The caption read, "3 generations of Whitmore women. So proud of this legacy." I looked at the picture for a long time. I didn't zoom in. I didn't scroll. I just stared at Evelyn's hand on Charlotte's backlight, and effortless, like it had always belonged there. I thought about the family photos I used to keep in a green velvet album. Pages had loosened over time. Some captions had faded. A few photos had peeled at the corners. Caleb at 5 with cake on his chin. Caleb at 11 in a second-hand suit too big for his shoulders. Caleb at 16, taller than me by then, smiling against the school gym wall. None of those were posted online. They were mine. And I wasn't sure anyone else remembered them anymore. When the wedding invitation arrived, it came in a square envelope with embossed lettering. Ivory thick paper, formal. I turned it over. No handwritten address. No note. Just a printed return label, the Whitmore family. I opened it slowly. Inside the card read, "Mr. and Mrs. Caleb Whitmore request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration." There was no mom, no Genevieve. No indication I had raised him or lived through every fever and nightmare and scraped knee he no longer remembered. Just a line for RSVP and a checkbox for fish or vegetarian. I held the envelope for a long time before placing it back on the table beside a grocery list I hadn't finished. I didn't rip it. I didn't throw it away. I just left it unopened, though I already knew what it said. And for the first time, I understood there are silences so carefully designed they hum louder than anything ever spoken. I don't remember when the couch cushion began to sag like that. Maybe around the time the cat stopped jumping up there. Maybe earlier. He didn't knock. The door creaked open and closed behind him, as if the house remembered the rhythm of his steps better than I did. I was folding towels, the pale blue ones he used to wrap himself in after swim meets. They smelled of lavender and something older. He didn't hug me, just walked straight to the living room and sat down without asking. Same place he always had. One leg crossed loosely over the other like he wasn't staying long. "There's a venue we love," he started. "Downtown. Rooftop. Floor-to-ceiling glass. The photos will be stunning." I placed the towel down, not too neatly. I didn't want to crease what was already pressed. "It's perfect," he went on. "Charlotte's already talked to the coordinator. We put in a soft hold." The words came like boxes off a checklist. Ordered, impersonal, completed. "We're short, though, just a bit. 12 and a half. No hesitation, no build-up. Not even the word 1,000, just a clean fraction like it belonged in a recipe." I looked at the coffee table. There was a water ring near the edge from last week. I hadn't wiped it off. I had started noticing the things I didn't finish. "Evelyn's already helped," he said. "Furniture for the condo, some of the flights. She's been amazing." I picked up the towel again, folded it slower this time. "We just need one more contribution," he continued. "You always said you wanted the day to be beautiful." The word contribution stayed with me longer than it should have. It hung in the air like a coat no one had claimed. "That's my emergency fund," I said carefully. "For hospital bills. Or—" I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to say the word funeral. It sat in the room anyway, quiet and folded like the towels. He leaned back, crossed his arms. "If you really love me, this shouldn't be about money." There wasn't sharpness in it, just certainty. A verdict without trial. I nodded once. "Give me a day. I'll go to the bank." He stood. His hands brushed his jacket, checking for keys or his phone. Something more important than the moment. "Thanks, Mom. Charlotte will be relieved." He didn't ask if I'd be okay. He didn't ask what I'd have left. He didn't touch the table or the edge of the couch or anything I might notice had shifted. He left without closing the door completely. The next morning, I opened the envelope with the bank logo and filled out the withdrawal form. I wrote the amount in digits, then in words like they teach you in school to prevent mistakes. At the bank, Sophia Blake looked up when I approached her window. Her necklace had a small charm shaped like a leaf. I'd seen it before. Silver, delicate, nothing loud. "You're closing the account," I nodded. She hesitated, then printed the papers. She slid the form across her eyes, resting briefly on mine before falling back to the screen. My signature came out too large. The ink bled slightly at the tail of the E. When she handed me the check, she didn't say anything. She just looked like she wanted to, and then didn't. Back home, I found a plain white envelope from the stationery set Lena gave me years ago. I wrote Caleb's name on the front with a blue ballpoint pen. The loop on the C came out too tight. I left it on the table near the door beside the dish where keys used to go. He didn't come. Charlotte did. She didn't knock, just opened the storm door, reached down, picked it up. No eye contact. "Thanks." She didn't ask if I was home, didn't step in. She didn't check the envelope. She didn't comment on the handwriting. She turned and walked away like she had retrieved a package that had been misdelivered. I stood behind the curtain, not hiding, just observing. The kind of watching people do when they know no one is looking back. The table stayed empty for the rest of the day. The envelope had left a faint outline, a light rectangle where dust hadn't settled yet. The silence wasn't new, but it had changed shape. I made tea but didn't drink it. Let the bag steep too long, the water go cold. The handle of the mug was chipped. I turned it away from me. I thought of the drawer in the hallway, the one with the folder labeled medical, the one with copies of insurance forms, prescriptions, that list of specialists Lena once sent me. I'd thought I might use that money for an ambulance ride, a home nurse, maybe one of those chairs that go up the stairs. I'd seen commercials. Instead, it was being wired to a rooftop with views I wouldn't be invited to enjoy. They didn't take 12 and a half. They took the last small room in which I allowed myself to be central, and I gave it freely, without explanation, without hesitation, without being asked how I'd refill what had been emptied. They didn't take money. They took what I still believed was mine to keep the quiet right to be remembered. I used to think if I stayed quiet enough, people might remember to include me. That humility left room for grace. That patience would earn its way back to the center. The coral dress hung behind the closet door for weeks. I had chosen it without asking anyone's opinion. The only thing I'd bought for myself in years that didn't come from a sale rack or second-hand rack. I paid for it in cash. The seamstress said the color made me look less tired. I nodded. I didn't tell her I hadn't slept well in months. At the venue, no one greeted me. The woman at the entrance held a clipboard with names and a headset that blinked blue at her collar. She waved me through with a flick of her hand. 17, back corner, past the bar. There was no usher, no envelope, no check-in. Just a small sign at the end of a hallway that pointed toward the noise. I followed it, like following instructions left out for guests who shouldn't need reminding. The tablecloth was cream. The place card said G. Hartley. No prefix. No last-minute pen correction. The napkin was folded in the shape of a leaf, probably to match the invitations Charlotte designed. It sat untouched on my plate. Someone 2 tables over had a centerpiece with flickering tea lights and miniature orchids. Ours had eucalyptus and wax flowers still closed. The kitchen door swung behind me every 3 minutes. Staff in black moved back and forth without looking. I counted the trays that passed 12 before the lights dimmed. Charlotte walked by without stopping. She glanced once, then slowed just enough. "Coral," she said. "That's a bold choice. I would have thought something more muted." Her smile didn't reach either corner of her mouth. Before I could respond, she was already gone. I didn't adjust my dress. I didn't touch my fork. I placed both hands in my lap and watched the flame of the table candle lean sideways from the air conditioning. The speeches began when the string quartet stopped. Evelyn was first. She took the microphone with 2 hands like it held weight. When Charlotte was young, she used to imagine her wedding down to the color of the napkins, Evelyn said. She asked me when she was 11 if I would help plan it. Today, I get to say I kept that promise. Her voice trembled in the places people expect to hear emotion. Not grief, not joy, just the kind of warmth that photographs well. And Caleb, she continued. From the first day, I knew he would be part of our family. He wasn't someone we welcomed in. He was already ours. The applause was soft, respectful. I heard someone say, "She always knows what to say." Then Caleb stood. Charlotte took his hand briefly, then stepped back. "I want to thank someone who's been the foundation through everything he said. Someone who supported us from the beginning, who never asked for anything, who's shown me what love looks like." He turned. "Evelyn, thank you. I love you." The room clapped louder. Glasses lifted. A few people rose to their feet. Evelyn wiped the corner of her eye with a handkerchief monogrammed in gold. No one turned to look for me. My name didn't hang in the air waiting to be claimed. I stayed seated. The coral fabric folded itself over my knees like something I'd carried too far and now couldn't return. The waiter asked if I wanted champagne. I shook my head. He didn't ask again. When the dancing started, people stood and flowed toward the floor like water. The DJ played songs from 2 decades ago. A child spun in circles beside the cake table. Someone dropped a phone. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. Evelyn danced with Caleb. Charlotte posed with her cousins. There was a group shot with aunts and uncles. I saw the flash go off again and again, but no one came to ask where I was. I left before the cake was cut. At home, I didn't turn on the lights. I stepped out of my shoes by the door, walked to the bedroom, and sat at the edge of the bed in the same dress. The hem creased under me a small fold that wouldn't smooth out later. I didn't care. The hallway nightlight cast a line across the floor. It hit the edge of the dresser, then disappeared under the closet. I opened the drawer slowly. The tape under the wood still held. I peeled it back and took out the small key. The metal box hadn't moved. Dust lined its edges like it belonged. Inside, savings bonds, bank certificates, a deed to the land near Oak Hill signed in my father's hand. The ink was faded, but the pressure was still there, pressed into the page so firmly you could feel the indent on the other side. I counted everything twice. 312,000, not including interest, not including the car, not including the apartment. Quiet money. Money no one knew I had because no one ever asked. I closed the box and set the key on top. I looked down at the dress. My hands rested over it, the color still warm even in the dark. They hadn't just renamed someone else Mother. They hadn't just forgotten to thank me. They had erased the part of the story where I was supposed to be visible, and I had nodded along silently. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew none of them would be heard. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's the only way to start again with what's still yours. I didn't pack in boxes, just layers. A coat over a sweater under it, a folded scarf, then a shirt. One stack, then another. No labels, no urgency. No one knew I was leaving, which made the silence feel earned. The apartment I chose wasn't far, but it felt like a place untouched by memory. A top-floor unit above an antique bookstore, with windows that looked out over buildings rather than people. The air carried dust and light, not names or questions. Tom Reynolds, the building manager, met me in the lobby. He handed me the keys and didn't ask for more than an ID. I told him I preferred discretion. His nod was brief, professional. I handed him an envelope with a note inside. Please do not confirm my residence to anyone. No exceptions. He didn't open it in front of me. I brought little with me. A box of old photographs. My gray wool robe. 3 porcelain cups each with a faint chip along the rim, marks of use, not carelessness. A tin of Earl Grey wrapped in brown paper. I remembered the woman who sold it to me years ago in a corner shop that smelled of cardamom and ash. She said it would last longer than I expected. She was right. The first night I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the middle of the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and listened to the creak of the settling beams. I opened the tin, brewed a cup, and let the steam blur the corners of the room. By morning, I had placed the cups on the shelf, each handle facing out. The robe hung by the door. I left the album closed. The pages inside didn't change no matter how often I turned them. I sat with pen and paper and wrote to Charles Beckett. The handwriting came slower than it used to. I didn't revise. I would like to update my will, effective immediately. I'm also requesting to establish a small fund, quiet but formal, for women who've been forgotten while still alive. No explanation followed, just my full name signature and a line for contact via written mail only. The fund would be called the Quiet Mother's Fund. I didn't consider other names. I mailed the letter without a return address. I trusted Charles would understand. He'd handled my affairs long enough to recognize when silence meant finality. The days passed without messages. No calls. Not even a misdirected letter. No one asked Tom. No one drove by. I didn't check. I didn't need to. One afternoon, I unfolded a worn dishcloth I had packed with the cups. It still smelled faintly of rosemary. I set it beside the sink and smoothed the wrinkles with the palm of my hand. Then I ran hot water over the mug and watched the glaze shift under heat, soft, cracked, but intact. I didn't decorate. I arranged. I placed. Nothing on the walls. No photographs. No reminders. The apartment was not meant to impress. It was meant to fit. I never told Caleb I had moved. He didn't ask. I received a group email from Charlotte once, some update about wedding photos available in an online folder. The link expired before I opened it. In a drawer beside the stove, I kept the deeds my father had passed down. Folded, not framed. I reviewed them once, then closed the drawer again. Their value wasn't in display. Sometimes I wondered if Evelyn mentioned my absence, whether she used the word estranged or if she simply spoke in present tense and left out the details. I imagined her pouring wine at a brunch, telling someone that Caleb had always been raised right, that Charlotte was practically family before the wedding, that some people just drift away. I didn't argue. Not aloud, not on paper. The story could travel how it pleased. I was no longer in it. One evening, I lit a candle for no reason but to see it flicker against the glass of the microwave. I didn't speak. I didn't toast. I just watched the flame waver when the vent hummed. In the quiet, I could hear small things. The tick of a tea bag cooling in ceramic. The shift of air through a hallway. The memory of my name spoken once by someone who never raised their voice. Genevieve. No titles, no modifiers. Just the name I carried before I became someone else's extension. When the papers arrived from Charles, I read them slowly. The new will, the fund, my signature at the bottom already fading from the copier. I didn't frame the confirmation. I filed it behind the apartment lease. Enough to know it existed. Enough to make it real. I didn't forward my address, not even to the post office. The letters that still sought me holiday flyers, church notices, discount coupons from department stores, I let them vanish. There was no ceremony, no declaration, just the slow redefinition of space, until one day the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like room. I kept the kettle near the window. The steam made soft shapes on the glass before disappearing. I never named them. I didn't need more than that. I used to believe that distance was measured in miles. But I've learned it can settle inside a single word left unsaid or a name not written. Tom's voice had a trace of hesitation when he called from the front desk. "There's a couple downstairs," he said. "They claim to be your son and daughter-in-law. They insist on coming up." I told him it was fine. The elevator hummed. When the doors opened, they stepped in like strangers to a hotel lobby. Caleb paused, as though the light surprised him. Charlotte's fingers trailed along the edge of the walnut table. Slow calculating. Caleb broke the quiet first. This is your place." I nodded toward the frame by the hallway. "It's mine." Charlotte didn't sit. "You live here alone?" I placed the kettle on the table. Didn't pour. The porcelain cups remained empty between us like a deliberate absence. Caleb's voice tilted. Searching. "How did you afford a place like this?" "My father taught me how to invest," I said. I listened. There was a slight twitch in Charlotte's cheek, as though the arithmetic had just changed. Caleb glanced toward the bookshelves. Why didn't you ever tell me you never asked? No one touched the cups. No one mentioned the fact that there were only 2 chairs at the table. They left with a silence so intact it followed them out. The next morning, a bouquet of white roses arrived. No note, just the name Caleb. I set them on the kitchen counter unopened. The messages came soon after. Charlotte's tone clipped, then softened. Caleb followed his punctuation more careful each time. Then another message from her, this time with ellipses. Then nothing. 2 days later, Evelyn's number lit up the screen. "We should clear the air," she said. "Too many misunderstandings." I traced the rim of the chipped teacup beside me, the one with the hairline crack shaped like a question mark. I don't meet with people who remembered my name only after the budget ledger disappeared. She didn't respond. That evening, I checked the cabinet where the ledger used to be, not out of need, just habit. The shelf was empty, except for a slip of paper where I had once written grocery lists when Caleb was little. Bananas, granola, 2% milk. He had called it the grown-up kind. I hadn't known then that names could vanish in stages. Later that week, another bouquet arrived. This time, white lilies. Charlotte's name was on the card. No message. Just a return address in pencil faint, as if unsure whether it should remain. The neighbors on the floor stopped me once, casually. "We saw your son and his wife. Lovely couple. You must be proud." I offered a neutral smile, nothing more. Charlotte sent a voice message. "I think it's time we put things behind us. The wedding was complicated, and maybe we all misunderstood intentions. But we're family. That has to mean something." I didn't reply. I listened to the message once then, once more, only because I recognized the tone. It was the same tone she used when asking the caterer to tone down the seasoning for the older guests. Caleb wrote again. "Mom, if this is about the wedding budget, we can explain. Things were rushed, the list got complicated. You should have spoken up." I deleted the message without opening it fully. The notification bubble lingered longer than it should have. I remembered the dress I wore that day. Navy with a pearl pin at the collar. Not expensive, but deliberate. Charlotte had looked past me 3 times before registering I was there. At the end of the ceremony, she'd thanked the mothers who raised us. I had clapped with the others. The sound felt distant, like it didn't belong to my hands. That evening, as I folded the laundry, I found the old cloth napkin Caleb had used as a cape when he was 5. The red stitching had frayed along the initials GH. I folded it in half, then again, and placed it in the drawer beneath the invoices I hadn't submitted. A knock came 2 days later. Just one. No follow-up. I didn't answer. More flowers arrived. This time peonies. The kind Evelyn used to say were too delicate to last. The stems were too long for the vase. I left them in their wrapper. Charlotte texted once more. "The baby is due in spring. We thought maybe, if you wanted to be part of that." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. There were no photos attached, no sonogram, no nickname, just a statement. As if offered, from obligation, not invitation. I remembered a phrase my father used when he sold the small lot no one wanted. Some value only becomes clear when you stop offering it. The next day, the roses had wilted. I carried them to the kitchen. The stems were stiff, the petals soft at the edges. I didn't trim them. I didn't find a vase. I turned on the faucet and let the water run over them. Then I walked away. I no longer place framed photos on my shelves. I used to think memory lived in images, but now I see how they demand presence more than truth. Each morning begins with water. I fill the small porcelain kettle, a gift to myself the week the dividend posted, and tend to the bonsai in the corner. The roots cling to the soil like old habits, but I trim it gently, never forcing the shape. I only keep the shape it wants to grow into. I brew 1 cup of jasmine tea, steeped exactly 4 minutes. The mug I use is gray with a single chip near the rim. It was once part of a set, now a solitary piece, and that suits it. It never needed a full collection to be whole. No one calls me Mom in the Thursday book circle. They call me Jen. We sit in the back corner of a quiet cafe, and the chairs wobble just enough to keep us aware we're not fixed in place. We read slowly aloud sometimes. No one interrupts. No one corrects the way I pronounce anything. Jen, I brought that herbal blend we talked about. It's not too floral. I smiled, took the packet from Eleanor without inspecting the label. I trust your taste. We don't ask questions we wouldn't want asked in return. It's not politeness. It's understanding. Lena Marsh found me through Beckett's office. I hadn't seen her since the hospital days when everything smelled of rubbing alcohol and unspoken grief. She invited herself for lunch just once and brought banana bread wrapped in cloth. This one's got walnuts. Remember how you used to hate walnuts? I poured tea into 2 mismatched cups. I don't remember disliking anything I didn't say aloud. She smiled but didn't press. We talked about boiling times, climate changes in herb growth, and the right consistency of dough for scones. Not once did we mention Charlotte or Caleb or the color of the flowers he sent. I created a new postal address under the Quiet Mothers Fund. Envelopes arrive once a week, bearing gratitude from libraries, shelters, adult literacy programs. Some are typed, some handwritten. One came with a child's crayon, drawing a house with a sun, a crooked tree, and a woman without a face, but with a dress made of bright orange lines. I pinned it to the side of the fridge with an old magnet shaped like an owl. One afternoon, my phone lit up. Unknown caller. I let it ring once, twice. Mom? His voice didn't rise. It just existed. What do you want? I didn't answer. Money, a thank you. Do you want me to say sorry I looked at the bonsai? One branch had turned inward, curling unnaturally. I want an apology. Public. With your face. With light. No edits. Silence stretched longer than the conversation itself. He hung up. A week later, Beckett forwarded a link. No comment from me, just thought you should see it. I waited until evening. I turned off the lights, drew the curtain, and opened my laptop. Caleb appeared on screen alone in his office. The camera angle was uneven, the lighting soft, but not curated. No music, no jump cuts. He sat with hands folded and began to speak. She raised me. Pause. I don't remember when I stopped calling her. I don't know why I believed what they told me about her. Another pause. There were years I erased her from forms. I signed documents where her name should have been. I called someone else the reason I succeeded. His mouth trembled slightly. Not a performance, just unprepared muscle. She deserved better. And I can't ask her to forgive me. End of recording. I didn't replay it. I closed the screen, unplugged the charger, and sat in the dark. The kind of dark that doesn't accuse, just listens. The apartment held its shape around me, quiet, not sterile. The plant in the corner stayed upright. The magnet owl remained on the fridge. The crayon drawing didn't fall. I thought of his voice not as a son's, not as a man's, but as a sound I used to cradle. A sound that once meant future. Then obligation. Then absence. Now it was just sound. There was no undoing the dinners I ate alone. No reversal of the closed door at the wedding hall. No refund for the years I handed over what I had, assuming I was still part of the family economy. I no longer wonder what might have been said if I'd stayed longer, waited. One more call, answered. One more request. I don't need to correct the record. The record no longer belongs to me. The Quiet Mothers Fund made another grant last Friday. A shelter in Ohio sent a thank you card with pressed lavender. I didn't frame it. I slid it into the drawer beneath the tea towels. When the kettle clicked off again, I didn't rise. I let the water cool slightly. The tea could wait. I don't want him to fall apart. I just no longer hold out my hands. I never thought paper could feel heavier after reading it. But that envelope, plain white, no return address, no stamp, rested in my hand like something waiting to be put down. The handwriting was unmistakably Caleb's, slanted slightly to the left, confident in form, but not rehearsed. I didn't open it at once. I made tea, took out a plate I never used, and placed a single oatmeal cookie on it. Then I sat where the morning light didn't reach, where the shadows blurred the corners. Inside, the letter was short. He wrote of a sweater. You knitted it too small, but I wore it anyway because it smelled like cinnamon. He wrote of soup. You always added too much parsley. I only told you once, but you never changed it. He wrote of the first day of school. I held your hand too tight and you didn't let go. There were no justifications, no timeline, no explanations of who said what when. Just a final line, the only sentence that didn't begin with memory. I'm sorry I didn't see you, even though you were always there. I folded the letter once, then again. Placed it beside the photograph I hadn't touched in years, Caleb, at 5 arms looped around my neck. One front tooth, missing a crayon tucked behind his ear. I didn't frame it. I didn't burn it either. I put it back in the box where I kept tax records and utility bills between things nobody revisits. Later that day, I replied to a message from Charles Beckett, shorter than his, just a line. I'd like to change my legal name to Genevieve Alden, my mother's surname. Thank you. He didn't respond right away. When he did, it was just a form with the subject line requested paperwork attached. No questions, no curiosity, just process. The following day, I sold the apartment in town, the one with the brass light fixtures I once polished with vinegar and salt. I didn't go back to pack. Everything in there belonged to a version of me that had already left. At some point that morning, I received a voicemail. My sister's voice clipped and brittle. You know this isn't how family handles things. Another message came later. If you don't want to come to the holidays, just say that. Don't make a statement out of it. I didn't reply. I didn't delete them either. I kept them where all unread things go beneath the last checked voicemail from my doctor's office. That evening, I sifted through my desk drawers. Not to organize, just to find one envelope with no markings and a drawer that hadn't been opened in a while. The card read, Mrs. Genevieve Hartley, ivory with silver lettering. The kind you order in sets of 100 because it's cheaper that way. You always did take your role too seriously, my mother once told me. Caretaker isn't a title, it's just what women do. I didn't answer her then. I remember the cup of tea I was holding, the way the steam fogged my glasses. Don't act like he was your child. You were just helping until we got back on our feet. Another time, another conversation. You're always inserting yourself into things that aren't yours. Each sentence had its season, each still sharp, but now they sound like chalk scraped across slate, still audible, but no longer able to reach the bone. I placed the card into the envelope. No recipient. No seal. Just tucked neatly without pressing the flap. Then I placed it in the drawer under the desk where I used to keep scrap fabric and button jars. The drawer no one opens unless searching for something they've already given up on. I didn't write a final letter. I didn't compose a farewell post. I didn't tell anyone where to find me or why I was no longer standing in the background of their lives. Don't dramatize everything Caleb once told me. It's not that deep. We're just growing apart. but I wasn't growing. I was folding. Quietly. Deliberately. Like linen pressed along old seams. My hands still knew the shape of his lunchbox. My shoulders still remembered the weight of him asleep on the couch when he was sick. My ears still caught the lilt in his voice when he called out from across a parking lot. Once, years ago, Mom, wait up. No one took that word away from me. They just stopped using it. You're making things harder than they need to be, someone said at the last family dinner I attended. I passed the salt. I don't understand why you're being distant, another added. I asked for the rice. We've always supported you. No one looked at me when that was said. Somewhere between the lines of what they called civility, my name was moved off the place cards, the invites, the lists. It wasn't a rupture, just an erasure done slowly enough that I almost believed I had imagined it. But I hadn't. When the name change was finalized, I printed it out. Just one copy. Folded it once, slid it into the front pocket of a journal I no longer wrote in. Not to read, not to share, just to exist in its own quiet way. Later, I dusted the top of the bookshelf where the photo box sat. I didn't open it. I just picked it up and placed it in the lowest drawer. One without a label. One I didn't open often. Some things don't need to be displayed to be real. Some names don't need to be spoken to belong. And some stories don't need to be retold. They just need to end gently where they always should have. I never thought the silence could feel this full. The kettle had long stopped whistling. The tea cooled half-forgotten in a porcelain cup, with a faint chip along the rim, just enough to catch light if you turned it right. It didn't bother me. I'd kept it for years. The small imperfection made it real, something that had lasted not because it was flawless, but because it had been chosen again and again, despite that. The letter from Nebraska sat unopened on the table. I had read the return address. That was enough for now. I didn't have to rush. The signature line on the application form had been the first place I used the name. Not just any name. My name. Genevieve Alden. No hyphen, no double-barreled burden to carry. No echoes of marriage. No suffix of role. Just the one stitched into my mother's travel documents, the one she signed on checks she never let anyone else balance. I had asked Charles Beckett to process the name change without ceremony. He had nodded once, didn't comment. That was his way of showing respect, removing noise. You'll have to notify the estate office if you want it reflected on the trust files, he had added quietly. I didn't answer. The trust files could remain as they were. That part didn't need fixing. I just wanted the name that fit in my mouth without memory clinging to the vowels. Outside, someone was walking a dog that didn't pull on the leash. I watched them pass. At the corner store, I handed over my ID. The cashier glanced at it, said nothing, returned it. No pause. No recognition. Only the sound of a receipt printing and a nod that meant the transaction was done. It was the cleanest interaction I'd had in months. I passed a small girl at the park who dropped a bag of crackers. She looked up as I picked it up and handed it back. No names exchanged. Just a smile and the flurry of her footsteps as she ran back to her bench. I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to know anything more. In the bookstore, I lingered in the back aisle, where the floor still creaked the way it had a decade ago. I found a paperback with a broken spine and a soft cover. Inside, the first page written faintly in pencil. For the quiet ones. I didn't need a dedication, but I carried it to the counter anyway. It felt like it had waited long enough. Back home, I opened Lena's wooden box, one she had sent from Seattle. Inside, sealed in brown paper, a blend of mint and something else I couldn't name. I used it that afternoon. Not strong, not dull, just present enough to know it was there. A small pot of white chrysanthemums sat on the windowsill. I hadn't bought them. No card, no note. but they were blooming. I watered them just enough. The phone lit up once. A call from Caleb. I didn't silence it. I didn't answer. The sound came and went like a tide not worth resisting. The tablecloth had a faint wine stain from years ago, never quite scrubbed out. I folded it slowly and slid it into the drawer. My hand paused over a single card tucked beneath it. No name, no return address. Just a line printed in blue ink. Hope you're well. See, I didn't toss it. I didn't pin it to the fridge either. I placed it beneath a stack of old linen napkins, closed the drawer, and left the kitchen. I stepped onto the porch. The chair creaked under my weight, the way it always had. The cushion had flattened in the middle, and the arms bore the faint polish of use. I sat with the tea now lukewarm. Not hot, not cold. Just enough to feel against my palms. Just enough to know something was held. No one waved. No one stopped. There were no explanations to offer. Nothing to declare. The last time I saw my old name was on a business card tucked into an envelope I never mailed. Mrs. Genevieve Hartley, embossed, formal, an artifact. I had sealed it in a plain white envelope without a stamp, without a name. Just sealed. Just set aside. I placed that envelope into the lowest drawer of my desk that morning. Not for closure, not for remembrance, just so it would no longer be on the surface. I didn't write a farewell post. I didn't send a text. I didn't explain the name change to anyone not legally required to process it. Charles Beckett had emailed me to confirm, all records updated as requested. Wishing you peace with the path ahead. I didn't reply. Peace wasn't something to be granted. It wasn't a destination. It was a choice made quietly and often. Some days more than once. A bird landed briefly on the edge of the porch, pecked at nothing, flew off. I didn't watch it go. There were no certificates to hang, no plaques to commemorate this shift. But the weight had changed. It no longer settled into my shoulders. It hovered just above the collarbone, acknowledged, but not anchored. There had been years when I mistook effort for belonging, when I thought showing up would eventually count. But belonging, I've learned, is not something to earn through labor. It is either given or withheld. And what is withheld too long becomes something else entirely. It becomes solitude. And solitude, when chosen, becomes a form of shelter. The mug was empty now. I didn't refill it. Instead, I sat still. Let the sounds of other lives fill the air around me. Distant voices. A screen door closing the rustle of leaves along the fence line. I had nothing to prove. Not to them. Not to him. Not even to myself. I had learned to live without declarations. To let days pass without punctuation. I thought once that silence meant absence. But I've come to understand it differently. Silence can be presence unaccompanied by performance. Stillness can be strength, undiluted by need. And names. Names can be reclaimed not as labels, but as anchors to self. I sat with mine now, just mine. And I didn't need anyone to say it back.